fun,
dialogical,
innovative,
welcoming,
inciting equality,
emerging,
impatiently optimistic,
reflective,
disruption,
transformative,
evolving,
intergenerational cross-learning hub,
feminist,
inspiração,
experiment,
challenging,
collaborative,
change enablers.
I see Gender at Work as home. I have felt so supported, I felt so loved since I joined this group of amazing people, and this is really the place to be.
Every time I step off of online encounter of gender at work people, or I've had the opportunity to work face-to-face in workshops with gender at work people, I always say, what have I done right in my life or in previous lives that has enabled me to connect with such a wonderful group of talented, intelligent, sensitive, kind, generous people who come from such different, diverse backgrounds, bring such valuable experience that I can learn from and quite just enjoy.
Gender at Work is a diverse feminist knowledge collective that builds organizational cultures of inclusion, social justice, and equality through innovative, participatory, and creative approaches.
This year, Gender at Work is celebrating 2 decades of existence. Since it was founded in 2003, Gender at Work Associates have supported more than 100 organizations of all shapes and sizes all over the world in their efforts to tackle gender and other inequalities within the deep structures of organizational or institutional cultures. Gender at Work Associates have facilitated gender action learning processes, workshops on transformational feminist leadership. They've accompanied partners through complex organizational change experiments, amongst many other activities. This video is a humble tribute to the extraordinary members of the Gender at Work community, past, present, and future.
You know, when Gender at Work started about 20 years ago, a young Kenyan women's rights activist said to me, "This organization is before its time." And what she meant was that the same kinds of societal values, biases, exclusions that are mirrored in organizations, nobody was really talking about uncovering them and challenging them. What are these? We now call them deep structures. They're patriarchal power relations. They are gender biases, including the devaluation of women's work, of reproductive work of all kinds, caste, class, religious, ethnic, and other identity-based exclusions, colonial legacies of power and wealth. All of these that are embedded within organizations and that affect what they do. They affect how they make decisions, how they allocate resources, what they consider important. Those kinds of things were not made visible and were not challenged. And so, in that sense, she was right. Gender at Work was a little before its time. We were a small group of people who said, let's focus on these issues. Let's try to figure out how we can uncover and change these issues.
Every country, every organization, every staff person starts at a different place. And rather than bringing canned solutions to whatever the situation might be, Gender at Work starts by looking at what exactly is going on in the particular context and working with people from there.
Gender at Work was the first place that I heard about getting beyond training, because in those days, gender training was the answer to everything.
It took a lot of experimentation over 20 years and trust of people to say welcome and help us address some of these issues.
Over the years, we've developed a number of mechanisms for doing this kind of thing. Perhaps the most important was the Gender at Work framework, which is a mechanism which allows people to think strategically about what they want to work on.
Gender at Work's framework around access to resources, norms, capabilities, and rules is probably one of the best tools out there to understand the full system issues and the points that we need to tackle to get to that system level change needed for greater equality and inclusion.
I remember when I first came across the Gender at Work framework, and I remember using it in a conversation within Oxfam Australia to help us understand the interconnections between the gender policies and practice and mindsets of the organisation, and having a real breakthrough at a leadership level around understanding how our internal work on gender related to our external work on gender justice, and leading to, a raft of changes in practice. And I think part of what has made Gender at Work's contribution so powerful is the frameworks, the practices such as action learning that allow us to really deeply re-examine our assumptions, to see things differently, to try to do things differently towards gender equality, and of course how that spreads into so many corners through such a powerful network of feminists working in so many different spheres.
Every time that I read and learn and discuss about this Gender at Work analytical framework, there is some new form of learning that I have, how it can be used to analyze data, how it can be also used to do some kind of evaluation, learning, for facilitation. So it feels like, okay, wow, with this one framework, there can be so many things that can be done.
I've been using the Gender at Work framework for many years, and to me it's such an adaptive analytical tool, really to go looking at the overt and covert forms of discrimination, social norms and practices across society, within the organisations and within the structures in which we work. Also, looking from the individual to the systemic levels is really insightful, and I think that Gender at Work has used this approach to equality and inclusion in a really strong way, looking at human rights, developing transformative, empowering approaches for women of all types, diverse women, those who are most likely to be left behind, and members of the LGBTIQ community.
I've had the chance to work with women in Mali who have not set foot in school, using the Gender at Work framework to think about the dynamics in their communities and in their households, and to pull those apart in ways that allow them to use new concepts, be much more analytical about identifying opportunities for change. And then likewise, this breaking down of the public-private binary, allowing people to speak about what is happening at home, including men who, after participating in gender action learning processes, talk about their efforts to democratize decision-making within their households, while at the same time remaining head of the family, which is not necessarily, disruption takes place differently in different places. But certainly the notion of giving everyone in the household a voice, I think creates the opportunity for people to live really differently, whether it's in the household or in organizations.
As metodologias, as abordagens, por exemplo, usar a matriz de gênero transformou-se em algo muito poderoso, porque ela realmente facilita o diagnóstico, ela facilita a planificação, ela facilita o entendimento, ela é bastante, ajuda a estruturar um projeto, estruturar um pensamento.
While the framework and its versatility are central to the essence of Gender at Work and has been used across a broad range of spaces, from academia to community-based projects, our community is a creative one, and we continue to expand on that work through a broad range of innovative tools and processes in order to provoke the change we want to make in the world.
Action learning processes, capacitar, before and after action reviews,
Free writing, personal reflection, and learning are among the many key innovations I've come across in gender at work.
Emergent learning, a set of principles and practices that help us focus deliberately on learning together from and during the work itself in order to improve outcomes.
One key learning that I would share is the value and importance of working together at the outset of a project or a collaboration to talk about the North Star. And by that I mean not just the product or program or project that you want to deliver, but also the ways of working and what you hold as common or shared values. And I think that doing this work at the outset, whether that's in relationship building or in methodology creation, has enabled us to do work that's not just feminist in terms of content, but also in terms of practice and delivery.
Real meaningful change takes time. So we really shifted our mindset within IDRC from a focus on training and tools to accompaniment and learning from the partners about what meets their context and their needs, and then designing approaches that can really deliver on those solutions they're looking for. And just being able to co-create with partners and sit with them and think jointly about these tough challenges that we're all facing when it comes to gender equality and inclusion has been really transformative for me.
Another thing I've learned is the power of appreciative inquiry. So listening, being a critical friend, and asking powerful questions.
The other big mechanism is this idea of reflective space. Many years ago, Arun and I worked with a number of feminist activists in India, trying to help them think about how they could advance their work better. And what was really clear to them and what emerged from the meeting was this idea of reflective space. What they said they required was really a place where they could come together, think, strategize, build relationships, build trust, and advance their work that way. So over the years, we've done a number of things that try and create this idea of reflective space. And perhaps the most important has been the Gender Action Learning process, which has developed as different associates have added new wrinkles and done it in different kinds of ways. But it has really turned out to be a very effective way of creating a space in which people can learn about gender and action, to do things.
E também os processos do CAL. O processo em si ele é fantástico, mas a estrutura da abordagem, né? Os conteúdos, o olhar, são as lentes que traz o GAL, que ele pode ser adaptado de várias formas, mas essa conexão do poder das pessoas, a conexão do poder do individual e coletivo, que vem do nosso aprendizado de educação popular feminista.
Look for the deep structure of gender inequality just below the surface in order to understand where change needs to start.
One of the key lessons I have learned through my work with gendered work is the need to tap into empathy when supporting others in seeing, naming, and addressing deep structures. And through gendered work, I have really enjoyed using the analysis of patriarchal binaries as a way to get a deeper understanding of deep structures sustaining inequality.
Some of the lessons I have learned over time through my work with gender at work is that if the change I truly desire to see in my home, in my organization, in my community, and in the world has to happen, then that change must start with me. I have since learned that no matter where I am, no matter the position I hold within a system or an organization, I have some level of power to change things for the better.
So there's a lot of power involved in that position as the facilitating team. And through my involvement with the organization, I've realized that it's very important to examine that power and also to bring that power, not expose, but in a way just bring that power, make it visible, and just see how that is being received and also how that power can be shared with participants. So that has been one of the learnings, and that can only happen, which is also related to my second learning, when we build connections, explore connections with the participants, with the group, and where I feel safe talking about my power, where they feel that they can talk to me, challenge me about the power that I hold. It can be shared, and it's not being gate kept in a way where it's a giver-receiver divide. So I think those are the two things that I've observed myself doing, and that's been a part of how we as Gender at Work operate.
Gender at Work associates have also developed and refined a holistic approach through which the mind-body dichotomy or binary is not only made visible, but it is explicitly and intentionally challenged in practice in how we do what we do.
With time, I began to realize how absolutely key it was to make this different connection to the body, and to let people understand how that's a central part of what we're talking about in the transformations we're looking at.
And it's become an essential part of my practice. People see this as an association with Gender at Work. And it's a very important disruptive moment, particularly in the work where you're working with, for example, unions, because this is not something they expect. They expect to go into a dialogue and be clever with all the different issues. And here you're asking something different. You're asking someone to bring themselves into a process and to actually feel. But also it's a reflective moment. It's a moment where you are quiet, where you're with yourself, all very disruptive in spaces, in organizations where you don't bring your whole self into the process.
Now, 20 years later, the language of social norms and transformation, especially in the face of the global challenges we're facing, is quite widespread. Yet, there isn't that much understanding about how you go about bringing about these kinds of transformative changes.
And as we look to the future, I think the analysis of power, understanding the deep structures of power, making those structures visible and challenging them becomes ever more important. And work that enables people both individually and collectively in groups to challenge the power that keeps inequality so deeply entrenched, building that capacity with people is a critical contribution to change and transformation in our societies. That's what Gender at Work does.
Congratulations, Gender at Work, for having reached 20 years, and especially now in a time of political polarity, it's quite a feat.
Parabéns, Gender at Work, 20 anos, é amazing. Adoro essa possibilidade de estarmos juntos, de trabalhar junto, de aprender junto. É realmente um espaço muito inspirador, de muita aprendizagem e de muita reflexão. Eu tenho crescido muito, profissionalmente e pessoalmente, estando com vocês.
Happy birthday, Gender at Work, and here's to many more decades.
Happy 20th anniversary, Gender at Work.
Happy 20th anniversary, Gender at Work, and it's wonderful to be part of the Gender at Work family.
Congratulations, Gender at Work, and I hope there'll be at least another 25 years.
Along with the heavy lifting, there's always room for fun.